I might just indicate that this witness's face will not be streamed during the course of his evidence.
Sorry, it won't be screened.
Won't be.
Can you take an oath on the Bible or an affirmation?
Affirmation.
Would you repeat after me, please? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
but the truth.
Yes, take a seat. Thanks.
Been provided with the pseudonym BAC for the purposes of the evidence you're giving in this Royal Commission.
Yep.
Perhaps you'd like to introduce the person sitting next to
This
you.
is my mother. She's here for some support today.
Thank you. Now, sir, you provided a statement dated the 11th of May 2015.
Yes.
The contents of that statement are true and correct.
Yes.
I tender that statement.
Yes, it'll become Exhibit 28.5.
Thank you. Sir, I invite you to read your statement.
Thank you. This statement made by me accurately sets out the evidence I am prepared to give to the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. This statement is true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. Where direct speech is referred to in the statement, it is provided in words or words to the effect of those which were used to the best of my recollection. My full name is, do I need to say my full name? I moved to St. Alipis Primary School, a Christian Brothers school in Ballarat. I was 9 years old. I went into grade 5, and my grade 5 teacher was Brother Stephen Francis Farrell. I remember when I started at St. Alipis, I was told by other kids to steer clear of Brother Best, to go nowhere near him, and never let him get you alone. I was also careful around Brother Gerald Leo Fitzgerald. Nobody said why, but I remember the other kids were scared of these two brothers. I understood what was said that these brothers hurt kids. As a result, I was wary around these two brothers. My friends and I made sure we behaved in the playground if those brothers were around. I remember being careful to do nothing to draw attention to myself. In about autumn of my grade 5 year, I was standing near an incinerator in the school grounds. Someone threw a sealed bottle into the incinerator and it exploded. I was covered in ash. Brother Farrell was on duty at the time. He took me into the sick bay. There he started to undress me. I tried to stop him pulling my pants off, but I didn't really understand what was happening. Brother Farrell kissed and touched me all over and then performed oral sex with me while he masturbated himself. After that time, Brother Farrell sexually abused me semi-regularly. At times of a month, over a period of about 18 months to 2 years. At that time, my mother worked up the road and used to finish at work at 4 p.m. School finished at 3:30, so my brother and I used to stay at school until my mother had finished work. Brother Farrell used to play chase with us after school, and sometimes he abused me when he caught me. As well as abusing me at school, over time, Brother Farrell also abused me at my home and in a caravan my parents had at the beach. At first, I didn't know what was going on, and by the time I worked it out, was way out of control. I didn't know what to do or who to talk to. Sex was not something that was discussed, let alone the sexual abuse of children. In grade 6, I was put into Brother Best's class. I believe Brother Best left during the first term and we got a female teacher instead. I was relieved that Brother Best had gone. I do not recall a reason being given for his expulsion as to why, or an explanation as to why he left. In 1993, I spoke to this female teacher and asked her whether she was aware of what had been happening at St. Alicia's. And she said to me, in hindsight now, we should have realised that there was no good reason for Christian brothers to be taking boys into the sick bay and taking them down into the room of the school. When I asked her what she would have done if she'd have known about it, she said, we probably wouldn't have done anything because we would have been too scared of our jobs and our reputation in the Catholic community. I believe Brother Farrell left the Christian Brothers after I finished grade 6 in 1973. In January, I should be 1974, during the holidays, he came down. So in January, during the holidays after I finished grade 6, my family and I were staying at our caravan in Queenscliff. Brother Farrell came down and stayed with us in the caravan. This was the last time that he abused me. After I left St. Alicia's, I became a porter at St. Patrick's College, which was also run by the Christian Brothers. I was sexually assaulted by an older boy at the school, and I left school at year 10 as soon as I could. In about 1993, I spoke to a friend of mine who had gone to St. Alicia's, and he told me that he had been abused by Brother Farrell at school. I was really worried about him at the time, this conversation. And a couple of months after we spoke, he'd really come to pop and was killed. Sometime after my friend died, my brother came and spoke to me. He told me he knew the whole abused by Brother Farrell. He asked me why I'd done nothing about it. I told him that as far as I knew, Brother Farrell had only been abused me and my friend had died. He told me he'd been abused as well. He said, I think we need to do something about this. We discussed what we could do and decided to go to the police first and get Brother Farrell convicted and then sort the church out. About 2 days after this, we told Mum and Dad about this. They were absolutely devastated by it. And I still don't think they've fully recovered. My brother and I went to police and had our statements taken separately by different officers. The police told me that it would most likely be a contested hearing, so we were very careful with what we charged Brother Farrell with. Nobody expected him to plead guilty. I only brought 5 charges against Brother Farrell because the police told me I had to be very specific about events, places and dates. It's very hard to do that when it was so traumatic and happened 30 years ago. In hindsight, however, I regret not bringing more charges against Brother Farrell at the time. Overall, I found the police process very good. They charged Farrell fairly quickly and he indicated he would plead guilty very quickly. However, I found the court process disappointing. It was one of delay and adjournment. It was adjourned multiple times by Brother Farrell's defence lawyers because Brother Farrell wasn't ready to proceed or because his barrister was going overseas. My brother didn't understand how the Christian criminal justice system worked, but we could see no good reason for the constant delays. Brother Farrell pleaded guilty to 9 counts of indecently assaulting my brother and I. During the sentencing hearing on January 17, 1997, Professor Ronald Conway, a Catholic psychologist, gave evidence that Brother Farrell had been to see him in 1972 and said that he had a problem abusing a boy and he didn't know what to do. Professor Conway gave evidence that he gave Brother Farrell some counselling and then went to the provincial of the Christian Brothers at the time and said, listen, we've got a problem with this bloke. You need to do something about it. After hearing this evidence, I felt that if somebody had done something in 1972, my brother wouldn't have become a victim of Brother Farrell. About half a dozen people got up and gave character evidence on Brother Farrell's behalf at the sentence hearing. The Jesuit priest, Father Michael McGurr, gave a glowing report of Brother Farrell and made out he was a valuable member of the community. No one got up to give a point of view of the impact the abuse had on us. My brother and I have been told that our victim impact statements would be read to the court. They weren't. They were given to the magistrate who told us he'd read them over lunch. My brother and I had spent a lot of time on our victim impact statements and were very careful with them because we thought, how else will the court know about the effect that this abuse has had on us? I was enormously angry and frustrated that our victim impact statements were not read out in open court. How could I know whether the magistrate had actually read them? Because it was an uncontested hearing, I felt there was no time taken for the victim in the court process. Brother Farrell was given a 2-year suspended sentence. And I couldn't believe that his sentence was wholly suspended. Father McGurr subsequently wrote an article in Eureka Street magazine, which is a Catholic publication. His article was called A Day in Your Courts, and you've got a copy of that. I thought this article contained a lot of inaccuracies. For instance, he attributed the adjournments in the proceedings to our side. There were inaccuracies about the nature, and there were inaccuracies about the nature of his use. I was also upset that no one knew our side of the story because our victim impact statements have been not read out in the sentence hearing. My mother approached Father McGurr and spoke to him about this article. She told me that Father McGurr had encouraged me to write a response to the article. I wrote a response and sent it to Father McGurr. He came to my house out of the blue after receiving my response and apologised for not including our side of the story. He told me that what I was written in response would be valuable to print. He told me it was a story the Catholic Church should hear. At the time, Eureka Street was widely published. After this, I sent my response to Eureka Street. I never heard back from the magazine. My response was never printed. In 1995 or 1996, I spoke to Brother Michael Godfrey, the Christian Brothers Provincial in Victoria. I gave him a copy of my response and he told me it was worth printing. Around this time, some of my Catholic friends also wrote to Eureka Street and asked them to print my response. Lost a page. Have I lost a page?
Page 6.
Page 6, okay. My mother spoke to Father McGurr in the late 1990s. She told me Father McGurr had said that the then editor of Eureka Street magazine had refused to print my response. She also told me that Father McGurr had left the priesthood and that he had told her a contributing factor for this was that Eureka Street had refused to publish the victim's side of the story. After the criminal case in about 1997, I went to a forum in Ballarat for victims of sexual abuse run by Broken Rights. Brother Michael Godfrey, who was the then provincial of the Christian Brothers in Victoria, turned up. He apologised to the acknowledged the problem of child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. I thought he seemed to be a reasonable person with a grasp on reality. After this forum, I contacted Brother Godfrey. I wanted to talk to the Christian Brothers about Professor Conway's evidence. I wanted them to justify what had happened with Brother Farrell, and I wanted them to visit my parents and apologise. Brother Godfrey came to Ballarat and met with me. He then met with my brother and I 3 or 4 times. During one of these meetings, my brother and I explained our disappointment and our anger that the Christian Brothers had known about Brother Farrell's abuse. Brother Godfrey told us that he did not have a record of this. Brother Godfrey asked what we wanted. We asked him to meet Mum and Dad. I thought he or the Christian Brothers owed an apology to Mum and Dad because they had made great sacrifices to send us to a school not in our hometown. Brother Godfrey visited my mum and dad and gave them a virtual apology. He also met with Dad alone, and I was very pleased about that. In about 1998, Brother Godfrey offered my brother and I $5,000 each. We said no. Sometime after this, we met with Brother Godfrey and Brother Brian Brandon from the Christian Brothers. We agreed upon an amount. I felt this was a paltry amount. By the same token, I was not going to take the Christian Brothers to court and put my family through trauma. After we accepted the offer, Brother Godfrey left the room. Brother Brian Brandon gave us a deed of release which he told us we had to sign. He also said that we did not deserve this money and that the deed of release was to be the end of it. He did not want to hear from us again. As part of the settlement, the Christian Brothers agreed to keep in contact with us. We wanted some pastoral care. We wanted the Christian Brothers to take an ongoing interest in our lives and in the lives of our parents. We wanted them to ring us to see how we were going, to ring our parents and to offer our father some counselling who was struggling. The Christian Brothers also agreed for Brother Paul Nangle to come and see us and apologise. Brother Nangle was the principal of St Patrick's College and in charge of the Christian Brothers in Ballarat when my brother and I were abused. We wanted an apology from Brother Nangle because we understood that he had been told in 1973 about Brother Farrell sexually abusing another boy at St Olivia's by that boy's mother. After the settlement, Brother Godfrey did contact me from time to time and asked me how my parents and I were and whether my parents wanted to meet with him again. About 6 months after the settlement, Brother Godfrey called to tell me he was being moved to the Vatican. He said he would arrange for someone else from the Christian Brothers to contact me. This never happened. After the Victorian parliamentary inquiry, I met with Brother Julian MacDonald, who was then Deputy Province Leader for the Christian Brothers. Brother MacDonald apologised to my brother and I and told us that the way the Christian Brothers had treated us was appalling. He said we'd fallen through the cracks and asked what the Christian Brothers could do to help. We asked him to meet with Mum and Dad and he did. However, my brother and I never got to meet with Brother Paul Nangle. Brother MacDonald told us that he's spoken to Brother Nangle, that he's now too old and frail, and he said he has no memory of being told about Brother Farrell in 1973. When the bishops of Australia were setting up towards healing, I met with a representative of Bishop Peter Connors, who was the Bishop of Ballarat, and asked him who would like some victim input into what was being set up. The representative told me he thought this was a good idea, that we meet with Bishop Connors, and that it would be a good idea to get a victim's perspective on the proposal. Bishop Connors never contacted me. In the 1990s, I received 6 counselling sessions from Towards Healing. Since then, I have paid for my own counselling. More recently, my brother and I have sat down with the Christian Brothers and renegotiated a settlement. The Christian Brothers have agreed to pay for counselling for Mum and Dad as well. Mum set a counselling bill to the Christian Brothers. 5 months later, it still wasn't paid. They eventually paid it, but only after we had spoken to them about it. In about 2012, I was asked by a family friend to talk to a group of concerned Catholics about my experience. This group had noticed that the Catholic churches were starting to lose parishioners, and that some of the people leaving were parents of victims of child sexual abuse. These concerned parishioners formed a self-help group and are now known as Moving Towards Justice. Moving Towards Justice includes some Catholics, some victims' parents, some nuns and some priests. Part of the work of this group has been talking about the reaction of the Catholic community in Ballarat to their victims and their families, and the fact that some of the families have been ostracised. The group gets victims to talk to Catholic communities about their experience, which is hard. I've done 3 presentations. Moving Towards Justice managed to get $10,000 from Bishop Bird and $10,000 from the Christian Brothers. This money was used to supply the survivor support packages. We have some survivors who can hardly get out of bed, so these packages help them buy groceries and things like that. However, it never set out to be a de facto compensation mechanism for the church. I think the sentiment of the group is really good. The group has enormous potential. They're still finding their way. 8, 9. After the Royal Commission was announced, I spoke at the Australian Catholic Bishop Conference about my experience and received positive comments afterwards. It was very traumatic being a teenager and forming relationships. I had lots of trouble with relationships, especially with men. I also had lots of trouble at school and being able to finish school. I struggled playing footy or in other group male situations. I am always wary and cautious. Excuse me. I've been married for a long time and have been lucky enough to get into a stable relationship. When I had my son, I was really cautious and questioned everything that I did, especially when particularly when my son reached the age where I was abused. The idea that the abused becomes the abuser was always playing on my mind. There's not a week that goes by that the abuse doesn't crop up in my life. It's always there in the back of my mind. I'm ruthlessly determined not to let it destroy my life. I don't talk about it a lot, but it certainly does affect my relationships. I have good and bad days, and I force myself not to let the sexual abuse ruin my life. I find the reactions of the Catholic community to child sexual abuse really disappointing, although in my opinion it is getting better. In my experience, some of the Catholic community either don't believe that it has happened or think that you are trying to destroy the church. I feel the Catholic community doesn't take ownership of the problem. After my brother and I came forward about our abuse, my family lost Catholic friends. It was never blatant, but people just slowly drifted away. I think that the Moving Towards Justice group is a lonely drum banging in the wind. When I was growing up, we didn't mix with people from other religions. As kids, we didn't even sit with non-Catholics on the bus. Anyone who called our community into question was sidelined. I think some people might have moved away subconsciously and might have thought they were doing the right thing. In my experience, victims and their families often feel ostracised because people don't understand what has happened and are awkward because they don't know what to say. I know 4 men who were assigned leaders at the same time as I and who I believe committed suicide. Each of these have told me separately they were abused by members of the clergy in Ballarat East. I think the church needs to tell the full story and be honest. They need to be open and honest with their congregation and to the community about what happened, and not just apologise for it, but do concrete things. I also think the church needs to follow up with people and actively support groups who can support victims, their families and their communities. I want to see the church working to stop suicides. I want people to stop dying. The idea of Moving Towards Justice was to try and build support networks around families and their victims and their families. I think what we need to do is normalise victims and their families in the community. We need to get a conversation going. There does not seem to be any encouragement from the bishops. They talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. After Bishop Connors was appointed bishop in the late 1990s, he made a statement in the newspaper that he'd been to see every victim's family in the district. He went to see Mum and Dad once late in the 1990s, but he never came to see me. I think the place held by the religious organisations in our society needs to be reviewed. I fail to understand why they hold such a privileged place. No other organisation can move people into a community and have them invited into homes the next day. Clergy have no more qualifications than other people, and in my opinion, they haven't earned the moral high ground.
Thank you. Have that question, please.
Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you.
I just want to make a quick statement at the end. Well, I'd just like a couple of things for the Commission to address. The court process to me seems unfair. Victim impact statement should by default be read to courts, especially if the defendant pleads guilty. And if there's anything prejudicial in those statements, victims should be given access to lawyers to discuss this. It's not good enough for a defence barrister to have an impact statement not read because he just doesn't like what it says. Also, if it's read to the court, people can see how much weight has been given to it by judges in their sentencing. Victims and their families are denied voices in court, especially if the defendant pleads guilty. If anyone thinks that not giving us a say or having a victim impact statement read out is saving us pain, they are very wrong. This is abuse all over again. There also needs to be a better support process in courts for victims and their families, helping people through the system. Some people have never been inside a court before. It is imperative that a compensation scheme has the backing of federal legislation and is implemented nationally. Severe penalties for individuals and institutions must be the result of non-compliance, given that the Church and its institutions have taken an inconsistent ad hoc approach in the supposed implementing of their own scheme. Bishops and individual institutional leaders have to be made accountable somewhere in Australia. The scheme should also be put under the purview of a Commonwealth Ombudsman. The Administrative Scheme, or the Ombudsman, should be charged with regularly reviewing a significant percentage of settlements already reached to assess their fairness and report in Parliament and made publicly available. Due to the difficulty of getting any part of the Church into a court, victims don't have a benchmark for settlements of what they should look like. And if a victim wants his settlement reviewed, they should be open to them. In helping victims reach a settlement, responsible institutions should pay for victims to get adequate legal advice. In my latest attempt to try and reach a fair settlement with the Christian Brothers, even though they stated they would pay for me to have independent legal advice, halfway through the process they wanted to limit the amount of money available for this. In my view, if they're getting advice from a barrister, I should be afforded the same. Surely it is in everybody's interest to have these matters settled in a fair, equitable and professional manner. The scheme's administrators, however it looks, should also be charged with reviewing the arrangements reached and ensuring that its orders have been complied with. In many cases, Catholic institutions move personnel around and overseas, and details of settlements are unattended to. I acknowledge that Catholic institutions have done many wonderful things to enrich Australian society, but the sad thing is, in my dealings with various arms of the Church, many people have made wonderful statements, expressing heartfelt regret, but then take no concrete action to adequately address the hurt and anxiety suffered by victims. I have spoken to Ballarat diocesan meetings, the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, all to very little or no effect. As has been shown by their past behaviour, the leaders of the Church have a real gift for rhetoric. As a result of this, I believe the leaders of the Church have forfeited their right to a privileged position in Australian society. Every time I hear a member of the Catholic clergy criticising an organisation or government for certain behaviours, I wonder on what moral ground they think they stand. Some of them have clearly proven themselves to be untrustworthy, and the Australian government and people and governments need to hold them to account. It is about time there were some actions. Survivors and I are sick and tired of words, and I believe there will be no action. Given the Church's past appalling record, there will be no action until it is forced upon them. Thank you.
Can I ask if we have a copy of that?
Yeah, you can have the whole thing.
I'm sure the court reporters will be very grateful.
Yeah.
Nothing further for this one.
Anyone else have any questions now? No, thank you, Mr. BAC. Thank you for your evidence. You are now excused.
Thank you very much.
You wanted the next?